The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde tells the story of a dashing, wealthy young Victorian man named Dorian Gray who gets seduced by the hedonistic doctrine espoused by a garish socialite by the name of Lord Henry. Now, hedonism, according to the Collins English Dictionary, is the belief that gaining pleasure is the most important thing in life. This could be pleasure derived from art, food, music, romance, or anything else one might derive pleasure from. This steers him into a life devoted entirely to seeking out new sensations, no matter the price. Along the way, Dorian comes to realize the pitfalls of the path he has chosen, and demonstrates that the sole pursuit of pleasure can harm others and bring one's life to ruin. Constantly in search of new pleasures, Dorian develops a callous disregard for the feelings and needs of those around him. He begins by regularly cancelling plans with his friend Basil, preferring instead to spend time with the poisonous and corrupting Lord Henry, whose hedonistic dogma he is captivated by. Years later, Dorian follows in the footsteps of his mentor by influencing others in the same way Lord Henry exercised influence over him. Readers learn of various people Dorian knew who all met terrible ends. A boy who committed suicide, Sir Henry Ashton, who left England with a tarnished name, and a young lad called Adrian Singleton, who succumbed to an opium addiction. In an era when men were expected to uphold the Victorian ideals of decency, righteousness, and piousness, Dorian's hedonistic influence no doubt had a negative impact on their lives. This, however, pales in comparison to Dorian's horrific murder of Basil in Chapter 13 and subsequent blackmail of his friend Alan Campbell into disposing of the body. He threatens to reveal a secret of Campbell's which will ruin his reputation, and though never explicitly stated, many believe it is Campbell's homosexuality Dorian threatens to expose, something which was illegal in Victorian England. At this point, it's clear that Dorian's hedonism comes before and even at the expense of everyone else. Furthermore, Dorian's hedonism, which was initially supposed to unlock endless possibilities in his life, ultimately hinders his personal growth and maturity. When Lord Henry introduces him to the Yellow Book, a novel about a young Parisian man who devotes his life to all the passions and modes of thought that belonged to every century except his own, Dorian decides to model his life after the morality it espouses, thus limiting his range of experiences to those contained in the book. Knowing full well the disreputable nature of his lifestyle, Dorian also becomes suspicious and secretive by nature. This is perfectly captured in Chapter 12 when a strange sense of fear for which he cannot account comes over him at the sight of Basil, who he hasn't seen for some years. Clearly, his sins weigh heavily on his conscience, and he fears Basil may have caught wind of them. Consequently, his first impulse is to avoid him. These antisocial tendencies can only hinder Dorian's personal growth in the long run. Speaking of Dorian's conscience, he appears to get caught in the middle of a personal dilemma of conscience, which torments and eventually consumes him entirely. As he awaits Alan Campbell's arrival at his residence, Dorian begins sketching to pass the time, soon realizing that every face he draws seems to have a fantastic likeness to Basil Hallward. Evidently, Dorian is disturbed by the murder he's just committed, indicating that he still has a conscience. However, his obsession with hedonism stands in opposition to his better nature, resulting in a very conflicted state of being. For this reason, Dorian cannot move forward in life. Moreover, Dorian's hedonistic ways often cause him to overlook or forfeit other aspects of his life that might be fulfilling. Perhaps the best example of this is his relationship with Sybil Vane. Initially, it seems that Dorian has discovered in her his soulmate. Basil, despite some initial scrutiny, even bestows his blessing upon their proposed marriage, assuring Dorian that the gods made Sybil Vane for him, and that without her he would have been incomplete. Nevertheless, after a poor performance on stage, Dorian coldly and remorselessly dismisses her. So offended were his hedonistic sensibilities by this single experience of displeasure. In doing so, he squanders what might have been a loving relationship. Dorian also ends up forfeiting the country villa he owns with Lord Henry, so much does he hate to be separated from the picture that is such a part of his life. Here, Dorian's lifestyle has fostered in him a phobia of anyone seeing the painting, which might allow them to peer into his wretched soul, and he will give up anything to prevent it. At last, feeling he is beyond redemption, Dorian deems himself unworthy of anything that would add value to his life, so he turns to drugs and London's opium dens as a means of curing his soul by means of his senses. The weight of his sins is simply too much to bear, and he is willing to sacrifice everything simply to forget. Finally, Dorian's tragic downfall serves as a reminder to the young and inexperienced that the age-old ideals, though they may appear outdated, can serve as a solid foundation on which to model one's life. Dorian's life could certainly have taken a more fruitful and rewarding path had he not fallen prey to Lord Henry's poisonous ideologies. Thank you for listening.